This What's Working with Cam Marston podcast is brought to you courtesy of Michelob Ultra Beer.
They say consistency is the key to success. They weren't wrong. So how about grabbing a beer that's consistently smooth, consistently refreshing, and consistently light? You might just find that the road to success can be pretty enjoyable. Michelob Ultra, the perfect balance of taste and refreshment, and only 2.6 carbs and 95 calories. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. Enjoy responsibly. Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
Welcome, everyone, to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. So nice to have you along for the ride. Thank you for joining in. Great guest coming up today. He's a repeat performer for us. He was on the show, I guess maybe it was this past spring. Name is Marty Strong. Marty has a background in the Navy SEALs, got out of the SEALs and became a executive in the corporate world and has had some remarkable success. Not only did he take his SEALs success, but he's taken a lot of his corporate success, which he attributes to the training he got in the SEALs, and has written a couple of books about it. The one we're going to be talking about today is Be Visionary. It's on the desk in front of me. I've been leafing through it, reading a good bit of it, and I'm excited to get Marty back on the show. Let's kind of reset this thing already because there's a part of the opening that I haven't said. If you're new to the show, What's Working is the show designed to reveal the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace trends that are shaping and impacting the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace around us. I try to find the guests that can give us some insights on the things that they're doing, the insights that they're having, and give them to us in such a way that we can utilize them and apply them to our own world, our own lives, our own businesses, our own families, whatever it may be, and make each of us a little bit better at whatever it is that we do. Again, welcome. Marty Strong seems to be another one of these guys out of the SEALs that seems to have such a remarkable insight into the world around us and has transferred that insight into business. In the past, I've had a guy named Tom Shea on the show. I follow Tom on social media. He's prolific in the stuff that he produces. He also has a SEALs background and has applied it to the business world, runs a coaching training and development company, does some remarkable stuff. And I think I equate the SEALs training much like the engineering training. And what does that mean? It seems to me that when I meet engineers who are no longer practicing engineering, they went to school, got an engineering degree, applied their degree in the workplace somehow, and then somehow the organization has moved them out of that into something different. It seems to me, and this is my hypothesis, that the engineering degree teaches people how to solve big problems by dividing them into smaller problems. That's what that process of engineering does, is lots to learn, but at the core of it, we're going to take a big problem and turn it into smaller problems that are easier to understand. And I think the SEALs training does that as well. We'll ask Marty about that in a moment. But we are familiar with the SEALs training. I think it's called BUDS. That is the excruciating physical part, the extraordinary cold, exposures to cold in the ocean, the swimming challenges, the backpacking things with extraordinary weights on their back, and so few of them actually make it through. That's the part that often gets the most attention. However, I think there must be some component in SEALs training of how to manage problems, how to turn big problems into smaller problems that are easily solvable. And these SEALs seem to have this capability. And when they leave the SEALs, and if they make a transition into the business world, they use that same capability into the business world. Marty's book, Be Visionary, the subtitle, Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization, is what we'll discuss here. And there's a couple interesting blurbs, and I'm going to hopefully seed what's coming with you. He talks about optimization, which is a key conversation in all my business conversations these days, as perhaps the enemy of good. Optimization is what we all seek. However, if we seek too much of it, it becomes the enemy of what we need to do. We lose vision by overly optimizing. We lose our capability of seeing what's possible by constantly working to optimize things. So we'll have Marty on the phone shortly when we come back from break. Between now and then, though, let's tell you what the social media opportunities are. Love to get the feedback from the listeners out there, and I hope you will continue. Find me at cammarston.com, where you'll find my speaking work, which I'll tell you a little bit about in section 2 or 3 of this show. And on Facebook, you'll find Cam Marston, as well as Instagram and all the major places out there. I'm always trying to put information out and get your feedback on the show, so I hope you'll click on, follow, let me know what you think. When we're back from break, I'll have Marty Strong, and we'll be talking about his book, Be Visionary. You're listening to What's Working. We'll be right back.
When making the largest investment choice in most families' financial portfolio, you need a realtor who truly understands the market and can negotiate favorable terms and conditions. I'm Angelo DePaola, the Coastal Connection with eXp Realty, the preferred real estate advisor for buying or selling along the Gulf Coast. For full access to the MLS in Mobile, Baldwin County, Pensacola, Destin, or Panama City, just Google Angelo DePaola, the Coastal Connection.
I'm on the phone with Marty Strong. As I said in the opening segments, Marty was a guest of mine. I think it was in the spring of last year. He reached out, said, Cam, I got a new book. I got some new thinking on this. And without hesitation, I put him on the calendar. I'll give you a little bit of his bio as it comes off the back of the book, and then I'll get Marty to tell him more about himself. He's an accomplished leader, an active corporate CEO and chief strategist, was a member of the elite Navy SEAL teams for 20 years, leading combat missions and helping to design and test new special operations capabilities. Marty, thank you again for your time. Welcome back to What's Working.
Oh, thanks, Cam. Good to be back.
I'm happy to have you. Tell me what you're doing. Part of your book talks about the discipline you have of getting up in the morning and writing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to get the books done because you have a day job. I think a lot of people may be curious of what it is that you do when you're not writing books and doing podcasts about your books. You've got a day job. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, 2023 will be the 14th year I've been the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Strategy Officer of a group of companies that fall under a combined enterprise. The entire enterprise is an employee-owned structure known as an ESOP.
Yep.
There are 4 different companies. 3 of them are business operations, and the 4th one is the management holding company, which is kind of where I sit. So my job is to help my presidents with strategic planning, to make sure they have the resources they need, to do a little bit of strategic business development, look out over the future, look at things that might be a threat or an opportunity that we can deal with well in advance and proactively. Just shy of 1,000 total employees across all the companies. One is a training company that is primarily focused on the U.S. government and the military, and the other main company is a healthcare company. So it's all doctors and nurses, has nothing to do with the U.S. government. It's a regular commercial healthcare operation. So two different types of companies keeps me busy.
Yeah, no kidding. It seems that it would be almost a conflict of the personality who was the SEAL to sit idle and do strategy. In my mind's eye, I see SEALs as active people, always on the go, pushing hard. And the vision that you just gave me is sitting in a chair, taking phone calls, setting up phone calls. Is your personality stimulated doing what you're doing now? Is the SEAL component of you still active?
Well, it is. Stress management is something you learn in the SEAL teams, or maybe it's an organic trait that they just reinforce through training and exposing you to lots of risks. But my day is pretty much spent fielding either questions, assigning authorities that haven't been laid out explicitly. Both companies they're both growing. They're both very dynamic. The healthcare company started out as a small purchase of a company that had 1 employee. Now it's, about 180 employees all in, and it was just within a 20-mile radius of Richmond, Virginia. Now it's in 7 states. So
wow.
What that means is that there's a lot of sitting down and talking between me and the presidents who have less, I would say, entrepreneurial scaling experience than I do, and all the things I write about, the challenges, the stress, the dynamics, talent selection, talent retention, cross-training, all those things are things that I have a lot of experience in. And so that's, pretty much that's what punctuates my normal workday.
Let's get into the book called Be Visionary. It's the previous book was Be Nimble, Be Visionary. Where did the birth of this idea of vision and Be Visionary come from after you completed Be Nimble?
So when I write books, I use a technique that a lot of writers use. It's called a beta reader. So it's like a beta test. It's like practicing, a rocket to make sure that that's not going to blow up in the air. So what you do is you can either feed the entire first manuscript draft to other people that you believe are expert in the genre that you're writing in for their thoughts and input, or you can do it on a chapter by chapter basis. So in my novels, I find people that are interested in the type of novel that I'm writing. And for the business books, I used CEOs, active C-suite executives, a couple that were founders, a couple that were entrepreneur, startup, buy, and sell types, and then a couple that were basically in large organizations that had worked up through the org chart. So during the beta reads, there's a chapter in Being Nimble that talks about strategic thinking, strategic planning. And I got feedback from all of them that chapter should be turned into a book because that's something that's not taught. Everybody's taught the project management process and they apply it to strategy development, but they aren't really thinking in a visionary way. They're not thinking in a different way. They're basically just taking today and extending it forward and then working a battle plan back in a classic project management structure with milestones and dates, etc. And that's very engineering focused, and it's not very visionary. So you can do that, and you can keep doing the business that you're doing, and then one day you're going to look up and the train's going to hit you right between the eyes because you never saw it coming. And so I decided to take that advice and start working on a book that focused on being visionary and converting that into a strategy, and rather than taking your daily optimization information and just projecting it forward as strategy.
Let me read something off the back cover, Marty, that may be, and then I want you to expand on it. It reads this book helps leaders to understand that while business operations optimization may have value in certain circumstances, it can also adversely affect the leader's management style, his or her message, and replace strategic thought with short-term focus and gratification. When I go through the book, the word optimization, in fact, it's the subtitle, Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. It seems as if you're saying our quest, the quest of business today, to optimize organizations, to optimize our efficiency, to optimize the sale, to whatever it may be, our focus towards optimization is getting in the way of opportunity. The focus towards optimization is essentially hamstringing us, is limiting what we are capable of. Can you respond to that?
Well, first off, you nailed it. That's exactly what the intent is of the book, is essentially the theme of the book. If people look at like publicly traded companies for about the last 20 years have become very, very short range focused. And part of that is because about 20 years or so ago, the CEOs, C-suite executives in publicly traded companies, their compensation changed from salaries to stock options. So stock options move up or down based on what the market thinks the value of those stocks are. So if you do things such as stock buybacks, or you decide not to invest in the future, you save the money and make the bottom line look better, your margins look better, you pump up the value of the stock, and then the average C-suite executive's tenure is about 3 years in the United States.
Yeah.
So, 3 years later, you punch out with your stock options. Stock options are worth 45% more than they were when you took over. The shareholders are happy because they have the same effect on their statements. You're happy, but the thing is the company basically was steering towards something that was 36 months away that had nothing to do with the market, the competition, innovation, or what the future really held for their industry.
So they were focusing short term. We've heard this, focusing short term. Do you have off the top of your head an example, an organization who absolutely optimized everything, but then got hit between the eyes with an oncoming train?
I don't have one in particular. The example I use that people tend to understand is if you were the most efficient, the most optimized chuck wagon maker in 1907, and you had the highest standards of performance, and everybody were buying your wagons and hitching a horse to it, and everybody was extremely happy, and you had great margins, and you just kept doing the same thing over and over again as your strategy. One day you'd look up and realize that the horse and buggy age was over, and somebody had invented this thing called the car.
Right.
And you're out of business. So optimization wasn't going to prepare you for the entire, the titanic shift in the mobility marketplace. And you didn't know about it because you weren't paying attention. And if you were paying attention, it was something that you just kind of glanced at and said, well, that'll never go anywhere. And that happens much, much faster now in all phases and all categories of technology. The shelf life of technology is extremely short these days. So you really have to be careful that you're not analyzing and thinking and planning in kind of a vacuum, looking at the tips of your toes, trying to fix the thing that you actually are producing now or the service you're delivering now. Because if you don't look up, you may find that when you finally get it perfect, you look up and the entire industry has leapfrogged you and passed you by.
Yeah, but
they saw the future. They went to the future, and you've been working on the present and the past and trying to optimize and perfect it.
It seems really difficult for an individual, whether he or she is the CEO or somewhere along the line, for them to say, boy, I'm getting good at making pagers, let's say. We're getting really good at making pagers. We've got this down quick, and now's the time for us to shine. Because of our efficiencies, we're really killing it. Now's the time for us to shine. And if I understand you correctly, what you're telling them is, hey, you may be a good pager maker, you may be a good chuck wagon maker, but you need to stop focusing on that. Is it the job of one individual? Well, let's hold on to that question. We're coming up to break here. So it sounds as if the thing that you're asking people to do is certainly to get better at what it is that you're doing, but nevertheless, get out of your comfort zone and see what's going on out there real quick.
Yeah, that's right. Are you in the pager business or are you in the communications business?
Interesting.
If you're in the pager business, you focus on pagers. If you're in the communications business, you try to figure out a better way to communicate.
So what you're doing with your CEOs, I guess, is giving them a broader view of the business that they're in versus the actual way they're earning their money right now. Let's get into that after the break. You're listening to What's Working. I'm on the lines with Marty Strong. We'll be right back.
I'm Paul Lewis, General Manager of Roy Lewis Construction. Many of our commercial buildings you drive by daily on both sides of the bay are the fruits of our client relationship since our beginning in the early 80s. It is our mission to bring value to our clients, from retrofits to ground-up construction and everything in between. We have more advocates than any of our competitors who have been in business twice as long. Same with repeat business, same with referrals. Find us online at roylewisconstruction.com and let's talk about your next commercial project.
Marty Strong is my guest today. His newest book is called Be Visionary. The subtitle, A Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. Prior to the break, he and I were talking about the actual business that you're in versus the product that you make. Marty, I think there's opportunity to dig into that a little bit. And I would imagine for some leaders, they're not aware of the business they're in the product business. Can you expand on that?
Well, if you think about it, it's human nature. The leaders are a product of their industry. And if they've stayed in one company for a long time, they're the product of the culture and the traditions and the kind of standard operating procedures and the strategy of those corporations. So it makes sense that if you spent, say, 20 years in that environment, that you are focusing on the things that environment is reinforcing and rewarding that you focus on. So improving a product incrementally, reducing the cost of the product, increasing the price of the product, opening up the margins of a product. Those are the things that you're doing. That's the trench work. And if you are really, really good at that, and another I guess, would be optimization. If you're really good at optimizing all elements related to that product or service, you advance. You either advance in the industry or advance in the company you're in, and on one day you're there making all the decisions for everything. And why would you act any different? You're the same zebra with the same stripes. You're just getting paid more, and you got to fancy your title, but you haven't changed the way you think. You've actually been reinforcing the way you used to think.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard for C-suite executives to step back and kind of get out of their own skin and see that for what it is. Because really what a C-suite executive should be doing is letting lower level management focus on optimization. Optimization is not a bad thing, but optimization to the exclusion of all other thinking becomes strategy by default, and that's not a good thing.
So I'm sorry, Marty, continue.
No, just going to say, so with the role of a senior leader, I don't care if it's a startup company or if it's a Fortune 100 company, is actually to sit back and engage the environment, all elements of the environment, the kind of the business ecosystem of their segment, their sector, their industry, their region, if they're a global participant, the global environment, economics, all those things, and do that as a regular routine, because if they're not doing it, nobody is.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and this is way off track. Does this predict the rise of the liberal arts graduate over the engineers? The engineers have been the leaders of business for as long as I can remember. But is this way of thinking that you're describing throwing a bone to the liberal arts grads out there that took philosophy and writing and history versus the biomedical and electrical engineers?
I think that's a binary combination that would spell success. Now, the problem with that is that liberal arts person is never going to make it to that C-suite if they have to work up through the system, which is the way, the metric, the merit system in the United States, military, the government, or in private business, they don't bring somebody in at that high level like that. They bring those people up from the bottom. So it's very, very hard in a technology company, for example, or a finance company, to not have a finance or technology person at the top, because it's the way the system's designed. So you're really enlightened as a board, let's say, if you decide that you have a really strong technology, engineering, or finance, whatever your technical area of expertise is, you're really strong in those areas, kind of from the shoulders down in the organization, and you reach out and you find somebody who is more of a big thinker and a more enlightened thinker, and you bring them in at the top of the organizational chart as the CEO or chief strategy officer. That's a very enlightened and very empowering thing for a board to do. But then who are the board? How do you make up a board for those kinds of companies?
Yeah.
You tend to have prior founders, prior CEOs, other technology experts. So you end up with this big loop of groupthink. It's hard to break out of.
Yeah.
It's not impossible, but it's hard.
Yeah. You've got a good point. Good point. Hey, let's jump into the book here. And this one kind of leapt out to me this morning as I was refreshing myself on the book, Chapter 3, which is called Self-Discipline. Monday night, I was in an audience and I heard the University of Alabama football coach Nick Saban talk about the value of discipline. And he defined it as discipline versus self-discipline. And they're looking for players and coaches with both. But he went into detail on the value of self-discipline and how that will elevate a player to become to play on the starting field, as well as give them much more opportunities post-collegiate to play on Sundays if they have a lot of self-discipline. Talk to me about self-discipline in relation to a visionary approach to work, like the book is titled.
That's a great question. Actually, I had a conversation like this last night, and the conversation started with, well, all Navy SEALs are disciplined because the military is disciplined. You're told what to do, when to do it. You're told to show up here and to do this. And so to be a SEAL means you have to be really disciplined. And I said, well, actually, it's the exact opposite of what you described. SEALs are self-disciplined. SEALs are individually disciplined to be the best they can be. They're constantly learning. They're constantly pushing themselves because they have a strong sense of a team value system. So they don't want to let the people around them down. They don't want to be the weakest link in the chain when the mission happens. And so the strength of that organization, the uniqueness of it is there is no external discipline. There's nobody coming in and telling them how to do it, what to do, when to do it, even how to think. because they don't need to. So the key to the aspect that Saban and what I just related is that you need a little bit of both. The internal discipline, the individual discipline, is what drives people to superior outcomes. And if there's a collection, a team, a group of those kinds of individuals, that group or team will also achieve superior outcomes. And that's kind of a starting point. The external discipline is essentially setting goals that are worthy, setting up the game so that the game has merit and it has value and there's a point to participating. And whether the game's an actual game, whether the game's a business, leaders that think the way, say, Saban does, realize that you have to have those self-disciplined individuals collectively pulling in one direction. That one direction is kind of where the outside discipline comes in.
Is there a way to go from being unself-disciplined to self-disciplined, or is this a born trait?
Oh, you can absolutely do it. It's like creativity. Creativity is in every human brain. I mean, the brain's designed to be creative. We were hardwired to explore and forage for food. We're more hardwired to do that and to absorb the environment and try to figure out what's going on around us than we are to do task lists. So, people are taught to do task lists, and then they unlearn how to think creatively and experimentally. It's the same thing with the case of discipline. If you mentioned earlier, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and by the time I feed the animals and have coffee at 5:30, I'm at the computer and I'm writing. I do that to get all that creative stuff out of the way before I have to go in and do my day job as a CEO. Now, I didn't do that my entire life. I decided to do that because I decided I wanted to write books, and that was the only time I could do it without interrupting my livelihood. So I made a conscious decision to do it. It had to become a habit. I had to do it every day, like brushing your teeth. Or putting your shoes on. There are things you do all the time every day. You don't even realize that they are a part of your personal discipline system. So just add that one more element and then practice that new element. It'll eventually become a habit, and then it'll become a part of you. You won't even think about it anymore. And so, yes, everybody can do it. Everybody can add that one thing. I think what people do is they get, it's like the New Year's resolution issue. They don't think about the one thing. They think, I'm going to do 7 things.
Yeah.
And then they get frustrated because there's no way you can change your life that radically, that quickly, and that dramatically. And so they feel like they're failing on all 7, so they just quit.
So I made an argument in the opening comments. I didn't have you on the line yet, and that is SEALs and engineers seem to have a capability of thinking through problems better than the rest of us. And in fact, the argument that I made in the opening comments were that engineers in the engineering training, as they go through the courses, are taught to solve big problems by looking at them as breaking them into small problems. My suspicion is that the SEALs training is similar. Now, when we talk about SEALs training, everybody thinks of the extraordinary physical hardships that they are put through in order to come through SEAL school. Can you comment on what makes a SEAL a strategic thinker? What makes them a self-discipline? You said they enter with self-discipline, but what about that process positions so many people with your same background into these positions of being able to consult with others? Because you must be one of I would suspect a dozen that I've met, and 3 of them that I follow regularly.
Well, I think most SEALs are probably that binary combination I noted before of people that are disciplined enough to become very, very good at optimizing whatever the category is, and at the same time are capable of balancing that by looking up and keeping their eye on the goal. And the goal may be well out there on the horizon. They're very audacious. They don't have a problem with the risk factor of goal setting. And that's one of the problems a lot of people and companies have. There's a lot of unknown once you get beyond next week.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to invest and spend money, time, resources on the unknown. It's not something that's rewarded anymore. So they just shrink back into what they know, which is I can pretty much tell somebody, my boss, the community, the shareholders, what I think is going to happen over the next 90 days. But after that, oh boy, SEALs don't have that problem. And it's not because they're cocky or because they're arrogant. It's because they have a strong faith in their ability to figure out what has to be done to achieve the objective, however big or however far out it is. And then that's where the optimization side kicks in. There's a
on the line. Sorry, Marty, going to break you off. We got the music coming up. On the line with Marty Strong, author, and former Navy SEAL. We'll be right back. Customer service never goes out of style. In fact, I think it's safe to say that customer service is more valuable and more important now more than ever. Hi, this is Cam Marston. One thing that my over 200 episodes of What's Working has taught me is how important customer service is to building and maintaining a thriving business. It's the growing need for customer service that's led me to partner with one of the state's leading customer service trainers to create our program called Delivering 5-Star Customer Service. Your team will get one 90-minute training session per month for 6 consecutive months. Each session builds on the skills learned the previous month, allowing your customer-facing teams to practice before moving on to the next lesson. And the 6 lessons address everything from appearance to electronic communications to conflict resolution to maintaining a service mindset. Our program travels and is delivered in person at your workplace, nothing virtual. You simply can't practice the level of the skills this course teaches virtually. For more information, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's schedule a time to talk. Remember, you have less to fear from outside competition than you do from discourtesy and bad service from inside your own company. Again, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's talk about your business.
Is paying a real estate agent worth the money? I'm Angelo DePaola, the Coastal Connection with eXp Realty. Great real estate agents are like the best doctors. They listen deeply, make your goals their own, stay current on trends that impact your decisions, and have experience navigating unexpected situations. We help our clients make the best real estate decisions along the Gulf Coast. Google me, Angelo DePaola, the Coastal Connection.
Marty Strong is a former Navy SEAL. His newest book is called Be Visionary: Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. Marty, one of the things that I have neglected to do on this show, in fact, and do in recent shows, is introduce you to my listeners. My listeners have been introduced to you, but my listener is typically going to be a 45-year-old or older influencer in their business. He or she may be the CEO. He or she may be the son or the daughter, the heir apparent in a family-run business. They be a manager, a leader of some sort. They're an influencer, which is a vague term, but it means that they do have some sway within the organization. 75% of them are male. So most of my listeners are male influencers in their business place. And I would imagine some of them are thinking, I wish I were creative, or I wish I could be visionary, or I wish I had someone on my team that I could train to do this. Is it possible that everybody can become creative, that can become visionary? We kind of talked on this a little bit earlier. Is it a gift that's born in an individual, someone like discipline that we talked about, or is it something that can be drawn out of them?
Great question. I start Be Visionary with basically an answer to that, which is, yes, everybody can be creative. Everybody can have a visionary approach to doing what they do, either as an individual, as a head of a family, or as a leader in an organization. You know, the thing that I kind of fall back on is, you know, if not you, if you're a leader right now, if not you, then who? So even if you don't think you're creative, or you don't think you have the ability to be visionary, you don't really have a choice. It's part of the job description. There's an old thing that an old story that one of my guys was having some trouble, a young officer, and the training chief said, you know, you're getting in there, you're trying to shoot, you're trying to run around with the guys, you're trying to do all this stuff. Why are you doing that? And the officer said, well, because I want to contribute. I want to be a part of the fight. I want to make sure that, you know, I'm helping out. And then the chief said, well, sir, if you're doing that, then who's doing your job? Because the officer's job was to look at the bigger picture, to make the bigger call, to be on the radio to ask for help. It wasn't to be shooting and looking for targets. And that's essentially the same responsibility of leaders and organizations. So you have a prerequisite, you have a requirement, it's a job description bullet. So just kind of relax for a second and say, all right, I have to do this. I have to learn how to do this. And the way you learn how to do this is you take time every day, 15 minutes, usually I do it in the morning, and you have to get out of the problem-solving mode, get rid of the to-do list in your head, clear your mind, and start thinking about the future. It's real easy. Think about what you think is going to happen a month from now to your business, to your family, to yourself. Envision where you want to be a month from now. Yourself, your business, your family. Then start pushing it. As you do this every day, start pushing the horizon out until you get to what's a reasonable horizon of about probably 3 years. And you're basically picturing a better future that shows your company in a lead position. It shows your family in a better position, maybe even moved by that time. Maybe you personally, professionally have moved to a different industry, a different profession, or you're retiring. But once you start doing this exercise, like any other habit, your mind starts to take in information during the day at work, and you can't help but start to applying it to the future. And that's the way you start to become creative. That's the way you start to become visionary, because you'll start seeing that people around you are speaking, and you recognize instantly that they're talking in a way that's very short-sighted. And then you ask them a bigger picture question, and they look at you, with a blank stare, and then they refocus on the immediate present, or the short-term future. And it really opens your eyes and then reinforces the habit. And eventually you'll get comfortable of sitting down and actually writing out some of these ideas and some of these visionary objectives and goals. And once you've done that, then you can hand it to a team to build that engineering design, step-by-step milestone strategic plan. But it's something that's teachable. It's something that anybody can do. And you're first got to clear your mind and be humble and not think of you as an expert already. You have to become curious and look at all kinds of information from all kinds of sources. And then the third step is you have to creatively look at that future and figure out how you want to achieve all the opportunities that are sitting out there.
So I have to, Marty, first and foremost, that was fantastic. And it sounds like a reasonable ask of anyone. But what information sources are you suggesting people pull from? In the example you just gave me, there was no information source. No one's reading the Wall Street Journal in this example that you gave me. Nobody's reading predictive books about the future from these futurists, as they're called out there. Do you suggest a source of content to help people vision the future, or is it purely imagination driven?
Well, you did touch on two things that I use. So I look for and actively read books by futurists. I read books on neurodivergent thinking, which is basically how the neurology of the brain is actually hardwired to be creative and be kind of an exploring mind instead of a to-do, taskless oriented mind. There's a lot of evidence out there to kind of reinforce the rationale behind being visionary and being a bigger thinker. I also am a big believer in looking for mentors and looking for context outside of the context of your own life. So, go to, if you're in, the food business and you have a supply chain, well, there's supply chains that move fuel, that move water, that move electricity, and find people that are in those other industries that do kind of the same thing mechanically and ask them what kind of problems they run into. And then start floating some of the issues and challenges you have. What you'll find is that there's a lot of cross-pollination of ideas that you're not applying because you're in, lockstep with your industry, yet they've already solved it in another industry.
A buddy of mine, I'm sorry, Marty, a buddy of mine tells the story of going to a convention, sitting in the wrong convention room. He was lost and he wasn't aware of it. He sat down in the wrong room. Enough people in there that no one recognized that he didn't belong there. And it wasn't until the speaker had begun that he realized he was in the wrong room. But due to the exposure of the content of the speaker, who was talking on something dissimilar to his expertise, he had so many strategic thoughts that leapt him forward in his own business by sitting in the wrong room. But it exposed him to new types of thinking. That's kind of what you're saying right here.
Absolutely. Every week I have an aha moment because of that discipline of reaching out to other people, people that are different from me in every possible, definition of the word different, age and ethnic backgrounds. And so the diversity of thought, and it's the thought part that I'm looking for as far as the diversity is, audacious thinking, critical thinking, stuck in the mud thinking, all of those. But to do all of that, to be open to all that, which is the intellectual curiosity, second step, you have to have that first step. If you don't have intellectual humility, you will never, ever, ever reach out. And if you do, you'll never accept or really listen and absorb the information and the intelligence that you're getting and the insights that you're receiving from all these other sources.
I think there's an extraordinary amount of wisdom out there. We're coming up to close, Marty. I want to make sure people know how to find your book, but I've highlighted this in the book that I have in front of me. And it was very similar to a comment I had with a guy I interviewed last week. It reads this: in my post-military experience, I failed to act in one significant leadership category numerous times, removing a poor or ineffective leader. Talk to me quickly about how that applies to being visionary.
Yeah, so the problem with that is it's a military problem. In the military, you leave no one behind, right? So as a leader, you're taught that everybody's going into combat with you. You don't get to fire people like you do in the civilian world. So it's your task as a leader to train everybody as hard and as quickly as you can to the highest level possible, because you never know when that phone's going to ring and they've got to go into combat. And if they go into combat and they're not prepared, it's on you, the leader. So when you take that in the civilian world, you tend to start enabling people that are underperforming because you feel that same sense of duty and obligation as a leader, to the extreme. So part of what you got to think about is it the best thing for the individual? If they're failing and they're just the wrong fit, are you doing them any favors? Should they be looking at a different life, a different industry, maybe a different position or vocation? Are you really looking out for the organization when you're doing this kind of enabling? Or can the organization survive people like that for very long, especially if they're in a critical position? So the visionary part of that is basically, don't treat it as an HR event, treat it as a strategic talent application or asset event, and then be fair to both the organization and to the individual so that everybody's happy and everybody's moving towards the right goal and the right objective, even if they don't end up staying with you.
I think that's an interesting comment, that in the military, your job was to enable everybody to be ready. In the civilian world, it's not so, and the military people have a hard time letting that go.
Yes.
That's about it.
Absolutely.
So, it's a remarkable book, Marty. I'm grateful that you've sent me a copy. Tell people where they can find the book and more about you.
So, Be Visionary came out in January. It's available on Amazon.com. Both Be Nimble and Be Visionary are available at my author website, which is martystrong.benimble.com. And there you'll find articles, a lot more about me, and all 9 of my novels.
Novels. So, that's not something you and I have ever discussed, is the novels, is the creative writing that you do. Perhaps there's another show in there somewhere. Thank you so much, Marty. We appreciate it. It's always good to have you back.
Sure. Thanks, Cam. Appreciate it.
We'll be back after this break. I'll summarize some of the best points I've heard from Marty. I'll repeat where you can find the book. You can also find it at the podcast. I'll have a link to the website. You can find it in the podcast, and we'll talk about what's upcoming. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. We'll be back after this break.
At Roy Lewis Construction, we're in the business of adding value. Whether it's working with you to meet your unique business needs or making investments in our community in lasting ways, providing unparalleled value and quality in every commercial construction project. When planning your next commercial project, reach out to Roy Lewis Construction. We'll pair you with a designer that best suits your project needs and work with that designer to balance the best architectural outcome with the best budget outcome. Find us online at roylewisconstruction.com, building legacies one relationship at a time.
Hey, this is Christy Bush. When I'm not coaching parents or telling amazing stories to teens about how to stay safe online, I'm listening to What's Working with Cam Marston. Now, back to the show.
Thank you, Marty. I really liked the way Marty emphasized continuous learning. And it's part of the marketplace of leadership today that I see is continuous learning. And by marketplace, I don't mean things that people are trying to sell one another. I mean, it's where the leadership transactions are happening, the leadership ideas are happening to those that are eternally curious. And he emphasized that in his vision planning. How to become visionary is to remain constantly curious. And I just, frankly, for my own taste, I don't see enough of that. Anyway, we're going to finish the show this week with one of my commentaries. And these commentaries air in Alabama, across the state. And they're being videotaped now and being utilized in workplaces as learning and leadership development and diversity, equity, inclusion tools. If you're curious about how you can use those in your own workplace, reach out. This one's on different generations working together, and it comes from a true story. Lasts just over 3 minutes. And if you're curious, reach out. We'll tell you how our clients are using these. That'll wrap us up. The commentary will be the final thing. Have a good week, everybody. A friend was at a customer's chemical plant with a young computer engineer who, by all reports, was brilliant and great at his job. My friend wanted to visit with the plant manager, so he gave this young employee the plant schematic and told him to go find the terminal to do the needed software update. A little while later, the young man returned and asked his boss to step outside. He was embarrassed, he looked helpless, and he confessed to my friend in a whisper that he couldn't find the terminal. A plant schematic is essentially an old school map, and this young man just didn't know how to read a map. All his life, he's been given directions through his phone. So reading maps was a kind of literacy he just didn't have. Now, as a parent and an old person, I'm often tempted to talk disparagingly about kids these days. I like to get together with my old person friends and complain about how kids these days are soft. They have no resilience. They have no social skills. Heck, they don't even know who John Lennon is. They have no point of reference for a world without the internet. And heck, they can't even read a map. And of course, my kids also have a good time taking shots at me. Though I'm not a boomer, they often shut me up with, "Okay, boomer," which makes me seethe. And which is exactly what they're going for. For a long while, I thought TikTok was about clocks. And recently, I've started going to them to fix the internet and the TV. But as fun, as tempting, as easy as it is to write off a whole generation like this, I'm not so sure it really gets us anywhere. Young people often lean towards new ideas as being best. Old folks are biased towards solutions we've experienced and that we know should work. And we both get frustrated when the other side won't buy into our point of view. We both get frustrated when the other side won't even ask us for our point of view. It would have been easy for my friend just to write off that young engineer along with his whole generation. Instead, he realized the world has changed a lot. And he had his own weaknesses too. For instance, he, the owner of the company, had no idea how to install the software update. Individually, these two people were helpless. But one of them had the update and the other could read the map. So together, they made a great team. As it turns out, we need each other. Of course, none of this means that my kids and I still don't enjoy the chance to occasionally tease each other. So if any of you old people like me out there are having a rough day, need a little pick-me-up, give one of your kids an opened, old-school service station map and ask them to fold it up nice and neat. You're in for a treat. I'm Cam Marston, and I'm just trying to keep it real.